Hi everybody, very welcome to yet another live stream here on the Mentour Pilot channel. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic and that you're having an absolutely positive attitude, because I really do, guys. I am so happy today because I have just returned after being into the simulator. So I've actually been out flying the 737, not in real life, but in a simulator for about an hour today in order to keep myself current. As I've explained a couple of times before on the channel, you need to do 3 takeoffs and landings every 90 days in order to be able to fly with passengers. And the fact that they have scheduled me into the simulator and I've done my 3 takeoffs and landings today means that there is a fairly high reasonable thought that we are going to start flying very soon. At the moment, it looks like we are going to start operations out of my base here in Girona on the 1st of July at a very limited kind of ramp up to start with. But at least it's something. At least it looks like me and my colleagues are going to get back into the air, which is great news. So yeah, I want to dedicate this podcast and this live stream to positive news, right? Because I feel that even though we see that the COVID-19 is still spreading, and there's still more and more infections every day, we are starting to see some positive signs in the countries where it's gone through, where people have had their lockdowns. We're now in Spain, for example, we're starting to lift the lockdowns. It seems like the government has it more or less under control. There's tracing quite a lot now as well. And there's just, like in the industry as well, from when I talk to some of my colleagues, especially in the airlines flying short haul and domestic, there seems to be stuff happening, as in the bookings for the coming month are looking better and better. It's obvious that people are not as afraid as the industry thought that they would be. People are just fed up with sitting at home, and everyone wants to go out traveling again. You want to go down to the Mediterranean to get some sun. You want to go out and experience new things. And this is exactly what I thought would happen. Right, I thought, when if you go back and you look at some of my older videos that I did in the beginning of this tragic pandemic, I outlined a couple of different potential scenarios of what might happen, and one of them, scenario number 1, was a fairly quick rebound, as in a rebound back to normality in passenger figures already by 2021. And at the moment, touch wood, this is what looks to be happening. And I'm saying that even before we even started flying, which I know is a little bit on maybe the optimistic side. But from what we can see when it comes to bookings anyway, it's that the passengers are there. So as long as the passengers are there, then the airlines will be there, and the airlines will be adding on as much capacity as they think is appropriate. So yeah, I have a really positive feeling, guys. So I want to hear from you what you guys think as well here in the normal chat. As always, guys, if you have some question that you really want to ask me and you really want me to highlight and get a shout out, then use the super chat function. I see Petra Olsson is already in there. That's great to see you here, Petra. But that's the way it works. I will be answering questions from the normal chat and the super chat, but I'll take priority to the super chat. So let's see who's here. Dave Hagen is here. Hey, great to see you. I heard good stories on P3D too, but never planned to switch to P3D. So we're talking simulators in the chat. That's great to see. So Petra, how are things? Great to have you here. Thank you for supporting the channel. I wanted to, when I have some time now, while we're waiting for most people to turn up for the live stream here as well, I wanted to really say a huge thank you to all of you guys who have been supporting me throughout this last few months, especially my Patreon crew up here. It's been really important for me and for my business, for my family, that you guys have been here. YouTube is famously fickle, as in the YouTube views and what YouTube pays and stuff is going up and down all the time. Right now, the channel is in a slow phase. I don't really know why. I'd love for you guys to explain to me why. If you have any suggestions of maybe things I should change, or if I should do more of some content that you guys appreciate to see, I'd love to hear that feedback. And the easiest way to get that feedback to me, guys, is to contact me through the Mentour Aviation app. Just tag @Mentor, and I will either respond in the forums or in the chat, or go to the submit feedback function, which is in the settings of the app, and that will send me an email, right? So if you have suggestions like, dude, I've gotten tired of listening to your really long videos, for example, then let me know, all right? But I had access to the sim today, which means that there are a little bit, I managed to get a little bit of video material from the sim, which I'm going to incorporate in one coming video. I am going to go a little bit more technical now. I know that during the pandemic, it's been a lot about the industry. I'm still gonna do some videos about what's happening in the industry and how it's affecting us and the airlines. But I'm also going to go in and do some more technical stuff. And guys, when you have a chance, I want you to go in and check out mentorpilot.com. All right, I'm adding stuff in there, and I'm likely going to start offering courses, technical courses on the 737 in there. Those of you who are my patrons, you're going to get to develop those courses together with me. So if you're a patron, you'll have a chance to see those courses before anyone else, and of course, that's part of the deal of being a patron. But if you sign up as a member on mentorpilot.com as well, there will be discounts for what those courses cost later on. So I suggest you sign up. It's also a great way to get kind of news sent out from me and stuff. So go and check it out, and go and check out the web shop. I'm not sure if my webmaster has managed to update the website yet, but in just a few days it's going to be updated to the web shop as well. Spyrus, great to have you here, Spyrus. Yet another one of my my patrons. Spyrus is almost always on my live streams. I do some Zoom hangout sometimes with my patrons, and Spyrus always finds the time to be on that, which is great. This is for a coffee for your first flight. Cheers. Cheers. So Marwan Jacobi sent a super chat question, but that has been removed by one of my very vigilant administrators here. So I don't know what the reason for that is, but I will surely find out. Mark, new one. So Mark, you put in the super chat questions, but you didn't ask a question in it. And I know that happens sometimes if you're too quick with executing the super chat question. Make sure that you write before. Now you already put it in, so go in, get into the Mentour Aviation app, free to download, by the way. Go to submit feedback and then write super chat question in the subject. Then I will answer your questions straight over there. Right. Cool. So let's see if we have some questions on the normal chat here. Is the future of air travel electric, biofuel, or hydrogen? From Kiloya. That's a great question. Now, I think that when it comes to transatlantic flights, to long-haul flights, it's quite far away for us to switch over to both to electric and to hybrid. Now, hybrid might come to a certain extent, as in we might see hybrid drives on the ground, for example, maybe driving wheels in order to taxi, or little robots that helps us pull us out into the runway before we start up our engines to reduce there. It might also be a little bit of electric motors helping out during the more demanding phases, like during takeoff, for example. But the battery, the energy density in the battery is not there yet in order to do really longer flights. However, we saw last week that the first ever real kind of passenger aircraft completely on batteries was flying. It's a Cessna Caravan, I think, that they used for it, which has 9 passenger seats, and it had a range of about 100 nautical miles on battery. So it's coming. Like that part is coming. I don't think that it will come for these longer flights. I think the problem is the energy density, the weight of the batteries, and the fact that when you have to go up quite high in order to get the true airspeed that you want. Up at those altitudes, the temperatures drops quite significantly. Batteries doesn't like cold very much, and so that will reduce the range. So there's loads of stuff that you need to get through in order to get to battery-driven long-haul aircraft. So I think that we will see fuel, the normal kind of gasoline that we're using at the moment, but also biofuels. In fact, there are like factories in Sweden right now who have the capacity to create the biofuel needed to run the whole domestic aircraft fleet in Sweden. But the problem is it's about twice as expensive as normal fuel. So with the oil price being as low as it is, it's going to be hard to see a switch there. But if the oil price starts rising, then we might be able to see more biofuel. However, the amount of biofuel needed in order to drive the whole kind of global aviation business is immense. Like unless we can find out a way to grow algae out in the sea and harvest that something, I cannot really see it completely taken over. But a combination of all of these things might well be what we see in front of us. So I think that we will see some big breakthroughs during the next couple of decades. We have to. There's no way around it. It has to be done. So I hope that answers your question. So let's see here. A380 CGN. Hi Petter, thinking of Saudi 163, what are nowadays the criteria to initiate an evacuation? And can it also be started by the cabin crew? Thanks and best regards. Yes. So the way that an evacuation needs to be initiated should be led by the captain, right? The commander is the one that takes the decision whether or not a evacuation is needed. And the reason for that is because you don't want to evacuate for every little thing, because actually when people evacuate, they have a tendency to hurt themselves. There's always some broken ankles, some broken legs, stuff like that, because people are piling up on each other and things like that. So an evacuation is something you do as a last resort. Therefore, you wait until the captain's command. However, there are situations when the cabin crew can initiate an evacuation by themselves, and that is, for example, obvious pilot incapacitation. So they've tried to reach the flight deck with a scenario where they're, where they think that it's needed, and there's no response. In that case, the number one can take the decision. However, fire on board. So an uncontrolled fire or smoke in the cabin. That is one of the reasons. A very unusual attitude. All right. So that means, for example, the aircraft lying upside down or obviously down a hill or something like that. Sounds of the aircraft breaking up or the aircraft actually breaking up is another reason. Ditching is another reason. So there are some situations where it's so obvious that there's only one way that this can end, and that is an evacuation where the cabin crew. But the cabin crew should always try to get into contact with the flight deck if they can, because there might be things that they haven't thought about. So if I, for example, would do a ditching, when we've come to a stop, I would still initiate the evacuation. So they would still hear me over the loudspeakers initiate the evacuation. I don't wait for them to take that decision themselves. So that's a great question. So JJ Lugin, great to see you here, Jay. Joe Petter, no questions, just saying hi. Great. I hope you're doing fine. I hope you're safe. Jay is another one of my patrons as well, and he's been a fan and a follower of the channel for a very long time. So it's great to come in and do these live streams and to see all of these faces and names that I recognize from way beyond. I mean, this has been an incredible journey so far. I think we're coming up to 4 years, maybe even 5 years since I started the channel. And obviously the last few weeks I've been working a lot on it. There's been a lot of content coming out, and it just makes you kind of reminisce and think back about the origins of the channel. And when I realized and I see people here that was there already from when I started, it makes me very happy. Mark Newman, just wanted to say thanks for such a great channel from a non-aviation pro. Thank you, Mark. This is why I'm here. If I can answer someone's questions, if I can make someone less nervous about flying or erase some of those question marks, then I'm happy. That's kind of why I started this channel in the first place, and it's great to be able to continue. As long as I have people like you who are appreciating the job, I'm gonna keep going. That's as easy as that. Raymond Lee, 3327. Can cabin crew initiate evacuation on their own? Yes, like we were talking about just before, they can under certain circumstances, but they should always try to get into contact with the flight crew, because, you know, in a situation like that, for example, if we know that we are landing with an uncontrolled fire on board, we will be initiating the evacuation as soon as the aircraft is safe to do so. So, you know, they would be waiting maybe a few seconds at least to hear that evacuation call, because the problem otherwise is, of course, if we've just landed and if the cabin crew initiate evacuation without the call, we might not have gone through our checklist, and the checklist include things like, for example, shutting down the engines, and you don't want to evacuate people out in towards running engines. So there is a very good reason why the cabin crew tries to wait for the pilot's command as long as possible. But if it's obvious that it's not coming and you have one of those kind of scenarios that I talked about, then yes, they can initiate it. Kukalti, can you think Airbus will go bankrupt because of COVID? No, I don't think so. No, not Boeing, not Airbus. They are going to, like, if they would indicate that we're about to go bankrupt, you can think about it as a huge pyramid, right? Where you have Airbus, of course, being a very important employer, European employer, consortium of many, many different countries. But then you have the suppliers to Airbus, which are tens of thousands of people who work with like building wings and creating the carbon fiber needed, the engines needed, the wiring, the plastic, everything that is required. If they would go bankrupt, it would create like a huge waterfall of other bankruptcies below it. And the fact of the matter is that it's unlikely that any of the states would allow that to happen. So no, I don't think that they will go bankrupt. I think they will struggle. But I also think that, like I was saying, since this is a positive live stream, I think that we are going to see people picking up their orders anyway. So they had a backlog of almost 9 years. Remember that. Almost 9 years. If you went in and you bought an Airbus 320 today, you would get it towards the end of the decade. So if they do cancel a few orders, it just means that backlog might be able to be cleared, and they get paid for each aircraft that they deliver. They do get a little bit of payment when an airline makes the purchase, but the bulk of the money they earn, they get as the aircraft gets delivered. All right. So, I think that there still is quite a lot of money for them to be able to stay afloat for a few years. It's different if this would turn into something that will be running for years and years, then sure, then all bets are off. But for now, it does look like the countries that have gotten it under control, maybe with the exception of the United States, and South America is really only starting it now for the last month or so. But the European countries, China, and Asia, the parts where it hit hard in the beginning, it's starting to recuperate now and starting to have a little bit of plans for how to deal with it, even on a long-term basis. As long as that gets to continue, then I think that that the impact won't be as hard as people first projected. So CA3340H3993. That's a mouthful of a nickname there. Hi Mentor, what aircraft types have you flown as a passenger, and do you have a favorite? Ooh, as a passenger. So the first ever passenger aircraft I flew on was a Fokker 28, and then I've flown all of the like the MD-80, MD-8990, the DC-9 I've flown as well. Boeing 737, pretty much from the 200 and up. Haven't flown the MAX yet though. I've flown the 757. I've flown the 747. I've flown in the 787, the Airbus 350, the Airbus 380, Dash Q400, Saab 2000, Saab 340. Oh, it's a lot of, and they're all great in their own different ways. I wonder if I've flown anything. Well, obviously Airbus 320, 321, 319. Have I flown anything else? Not that I can think of now. I don't think I've flown the 76, for example. Anyway, so I have a few favorites. The Airbus 350 and the 787 were very, very close. Like they were both very nice, very quiet, very comfortable. I think the Airbus 350 was just a little bit sharper as a passenger. The Airbus 380 was beautiful to fly in, as in so nice and quiet, and it picks up the turbulence nicely with those huge wings, so you do get turbulence, but it kind of was a little bit more of a rocky feeling than the more intense turbulence that you can get in the smaller aircrafts. So out of the aircraft that I've flown, I think the Airbus 380 and the Airbus 350 and the 787 was the most comfortable ones and the most quieter ones. The 747 it's just an experience to fly now. When I've flown up in the bubble up to the top as well, which was great. I flew with Thai Airways, Thai Airways or Thai Airlines. I can't remember now. Anyway, that was nice, and all the others are kind of the same. Same. Depends more on which airline you fly with than which aircraft type you fly with, in my opinion. Except for the small turboprops, so they're like cool. Like I love their acceleration with the small turboprops. The acceleration of like a Saab 2000, Saab 340, or a Dash Q400 is like immense, especially if you're used to the jets, because the jets will have a slower and more determined acceleration, but the turboprops, they just go, like they just accelerate like a sports car, which is great. Transavia fan, your channel, even if I don't always agree with you. I love your channel, even if I don't always agree with you. Oh, all right. In what way do you not agree with me? I always like a good discussion. Harlan Anderson, any technique to avoid the startle effect? Well, I mean, that's the problem, because if you have kind of prepared for something, you don't get startled, and then you don't get the startle effect. So the better prepared you are, the more thorough briefs you do, the more you look through, for example, weather forecast. Like the better prepared you are, the less likely you are to be startled in the first place. However, there's no real way to avoid the startle effect, because the whole point with the startle effect is that it's something unexpected that happens, and then you get a physiological reaction to that. So you might be as briefed as you want. If someone suddenly jumps in a clown suit into the cockpit and screams in your ear, you wouldn't have briefed for that, and you're going to be startled. It's how you react to that, and that comes a little bit with experience and training. Right? Maybe not the clown thing, but you will kind of get to know how you react, and the initial startle you won't be able to do much about, but how you react after that, how quickly you can kind of compose yourself and get back to business, that you will be able to get better at. So just building experience, building resilience really is the way to deal with startle. The startle effect will always be there. So Marco B, hi Petter, greetings from the Netherlands. Do you know what kind of light bulbs the landing lights on 737 NG are made of, and how many watts or lumen do they have? Or are they? They're different. So the newer ones are LED. They're LED lights all over. The older ones was this like the same kind of light bulbs as you would have in an older car. Like they weren't anything special at all. I have no idea about the amount of lumen they have. Unfortunately, I can try to check that out. I probably have to talk to an engineer about that. But the newer ones are all LED. There's arrays of LEDs, and they're extremely bright. They're crazy bright. They turn night to day in front of you when you switch them on. But the exact amount of lumen, unfortunately not. Sparkle Star, is it any way possible to land the plane without inputting any information to the flight computer? I mean, just the throttle and other basic controls. Absolutely. Yeah. The issue is that if you don't put anything into it and you don't set up the the bugs and the VREF speeds and the weight and stuff, you can do that without the FMC. Like you can do it manually with some knobs on the central pedestal. But if you don't do that, you can still come in and land a 737 stick and rudder, no problem. But you need to know the speeds then, and you need to have an approximation of where you're going to be for each flap step. Because you're not going to get anything on the speed tape, you're not going to get anything on the navigation display. So you're going to be raw data, proper raw data, and you're going to have to extend the flaps you will get, as in the flap speeds you will get, but you're not going to get VREF speeds. So BKG, I read that the bulb for landing light is $50. Yeah, $50 at least, I'd say. No, just again, sorry, I was distracted there because there was a question popping up. Yeah, so you can land it. The answer to your question is yes, it can be done, but it's going to be more complicated, and you won't have all of the safety margins that you have normally built in if you've filled it out properly, basically. So, Balai, Shurat Kumar. Balai is another one that is almost on every one of my live streams. Great to have you here, Balai. Before go around, who will choose runway, you or ATC? So the runway is promulgated by the airport. So air traffic control decides which runway is in use. And the reason for that is that normally air traffic control will be working together with maybe other air traffic control units, especially the bigger cities. So for example, if Heathrow is changing runway in London, then all of the other runways need to change runways as well, more or less, because the way that the structure of the airspace is built, you can't have one airport flying into one runway and another one flying into the opposite one, because then you'll get problems with the traffic flow. So air traffic control decides that. Now I can come in and I can request an opposite runway. So for example, here in Girona, which it doesn't really matter that much which runway we're using from an air traffic control point of view, they will look at the wind, and the wind will decide which runway is in use. Normally they will try to have runway 20 in use because it has an ILS approach. The other one has a non-precision approach, which is also slightly tricky. Okay. However, let's say that there's 7 knots tailwind. That tends to be around where the ATC turns over to runway 02. Now, 7 knots tailwind is within our tailwind limit. So we can land with 10 knots tailwind, providing that we have checked our performance. So if we're coming in with a very light aircraft and there's no wet runway, for example, and 7 knots tailwind, I can check that, see that it's perfectly safe to land. I will have a slightly higher outer brake setting. And then I can call air traffic control and say, we request runway 20 for arrival. And then they can give me approval to come in and land on the opposite runway, providing that there's no outbound traffic or that it doesn't kind of interfere with traffic flow. All right? So that's the way it works. Air traffic control decides it, and the pilots can request opposite in certain situations. And we do. It saves us almost 8 to 10 minutes of airborne time if we can come in and land on runway 20 here in Girona, rather than having to go out over the Costa Brava and do a long kind of DME arc and then DR approach from the other direction. It's always time consuming. That means that we're burning another 200 kilos of fuel that we wouldn't have to burn. So we try to. Hello from Pranay Vardhan. Hello, Peter. I have a LAX to Indy Alpha Hotel coming up in a few weeks. The 3.3 configuration 739 has a middle seat blocked. Any recommendations on how to make this safer? Okay, so you have the middle seat blocked. Now, I've always, I actually did a video on this. I don't believe in blocking any seats because of COVID. Because I have actually showed in one of my videos about this, I said that social distancing on board an aircraft is just not possible. Then you can try. Like if you have very low passenger numbers, you can kind of space them out. That's good. But in order for you to have 6 feet to anyone else, you need to block 2 rows around you. All right. Literally, it's not possible. So the safest way that we're going to continue to fly is by A, don't travel when you're sick. Even if you feel like, okay, I have a cough, or I have fever, I've just had fever, or whatever, don't travel. It's as easy as that. Just don't do it. Okay. Then there's going to be screenings in the airport. They're going to screen for people with fever. They're going to look for people who are coughing. They're going to make sure that you all wear masks. That you all. I don't think that it's going to be that you're going to need gloves, but definitely masks. There's going to be all sorts of hand sanitizers everywhere and things like that. So it's about getting people onto the aircraft which are healthy and not sick. And then once you're in the aircraft, then, once again, you're going to have masks. The cabin crew are not going to interact with you as much as they used to do. There's going to be way less in-flight service and things like that. And that's just the way it is. Okay, so with all that, I think that's going to be perfectly safe to fly again. You have to understand as well that the way that the cabin air works, it gets completely changed every about 1.5 to 2 minutes. So that's the same amount of air exchanges and the air quality as you get in a hospital. So like going on a flight, no one wearing any PPEs, everyone coughing. That's not great, and it's never been great. Okay, we should have had masks, or we should have covered our mouths and stuff when we were coughing, and we shouldn't have been. There's a lot of things that we did prior to this virus that we shouldn't have been doing in buses, in trains, in airports, in aircraft, in everywhere. I think once this is over and once we have hopefully a vaccine, I hope that people don't go back to how we were. I hope people are thinking a little bit more about hand hygiene, things like that, because it's important. Tell Petter to turn around, Christopher Johansson. Better? Cool. The pop that you guys are hearing, that's the sound of new messages coming, and just the pop that turns out on my screen and it's going in through my mic. So if you're hearing pops, that's what it is. I'm going to see if I can do something about it. Right, more questions here. I'm way behind here now. Just call me CA. Yeah, CA. Is there any airplane you dislike? Maybe because it was unreliable or odd looking, like the short, the short 330. No. All there are ugly aircraft. Definitely, I don't think that the Airbus 380 is particularly beautiful to look at, but I don't dislike it. I dislike unsafe aircraft, but fortunately, that's kind of why we have authorities out there, and they take care of making sure that none of those ever kind of turn up. If I dislike any aircraft, no. I'm a total av geek. If I see something that is rare, I'm just happy. So no, I can't say that I'm disliking any aircraft. Like you have the Guppy, for example, that is not particularly beautiful. The Dream Lifter is not good looking either, but they have a purpose. They look like that for a purpose, and they're very, very good at what they do. And I definitely prefer them flying the cargo the way that they do than having it kind of chopped into pieces and flown with loads of other aircraft. So no, I don't dislike any aircraft. Richard Burris, just showing my support and appreciation. Best to you and your family, including the puppies. Well, thank you very much. That's much appreciated, and I'm sure both Molly and Patchy will appreciate it as well. Saint Ranger, can you tell us a funny aviation experience that you've had? I'm trying to think about something that I haven't already told you. One really funny thing that we did. It was me and a first officer. Like sometimes you'll have aircraft. We have too many aircraft in one base, and you have too few in another for whatever reason. It might be needed for a shorter flight or whatever. So in some cases, you get to transition aircraft over from one base to another. So it was a few years back. It was the football World Championship going on. So it was during the summer. Beautiful day here in, I think it was maybe 2014 or something like that. Beautiful day here in Spain. Spain was playing against someone, which I can't remember who it was now. But anyway, I was on standby. So I was called by the company and they said, listen, there's no hurry, but if you could go to the airport, pick up, there's a 737 standing there. We want you to fly it down to Alicante, right? So Alicante is about 40 minutes flight from here, more or less. And so I went out. I met up with my first officer. Lovely, because there was no time pressure. There was no cabin crew. There's no passengers, and they said like, we just need it for tomorrow morning. So don't worry, just take your time. So it was a really chilled and nice experience. Just go out. We prepared the flight as we would. We went out to the aircraft, did the walk around, taxied out, took off, and flew down towards Alicante. Completely empty aircraft. And then we were sitting there kind of laughing and saying like, listen, be cool. Wouldn't it be nice if they just called us up and said, listen, why don't you guys just take a hotel down there in Alicante and stay and watch football down there? Wouldn't that be nice? The way that you kind of laugh because it was such a nice experience. And then as we landed in Alicante and taxied in, and I'd switched on my phone, I had a message from crew control. And they're like, hey, actually, we are going to need you to fly that aircraft back. But don't worry, you can do it tomorrow. So, we'll put you up in a hotel in Alicante, and we'll just stay there. And then tomorrow morning you can pick up the aircraft because it's going to be needed today here in the afternoon, but it's going to be needed back in Girona again. So tomorrow morning, just fly it back again with you. So that's what we did. We went out into town, chilled a little bit, watched the football game in a bar. Obviously, we couldn't drink, but it doesn't matter. And then the morning after, we flew it back. It was literally like going with a friend for a trip to Alicante with your own 737. Really, really cool experience. It's one of those things that you remember, like, because it was so out of the ordinary as well. Les Chase, do you think planting trees on a bank along a main taxiway and road at Bournemouth could affect bird and wildlife strike at the airport? I don't know exactly what trees you're talking about, but they do plan what they plant around the airport to make sure to minimize the bird hazard. That they do. They try to keep it as little grain and stuff as possible, mostly grass, keep the grass short. They really try, and that's why actually when you have a bird strike, if you have a bird strike and you're supposed to tell air traffic control where you had it, they always go out and look for the bird. And in fact, they should be, if they find the bird, they should open it up and they should look inside of it to see what it's been eating, to try to figure out what in the close area of the airport these birds are feeding on, and see if they can eliminate it. So they are thinking very, very closely on how to avoid bird strikes. Trees, I don't know whether or not that will work, depends. But yeah, that's the way they do it anyway. Daniel Tedens, I'm a test driver for the new electric buses in Gothenburg. Invite you to come and try them out. Hope to see more electrified aviation. Love your channel. Yeah, I hope so as well. I really hope to continue the discussion that we had before. I really hope that we get to see electric aircraft, maybe on the short to medium haul, maybe on the taxi flight. If you can start to connect cities, domestic cities, for example, with these small electric aircraft, maybe a whole fleet of them doing much more flights. That would be awesome. That would be great. Because an electric aircraft, making the batteries is not great for the environment, but if you can utilize it fully, and if we can get the energy density up, maybe 100 nautical miles is a bit short, to be honest, but if you can triple that, so you have 300 nautical miles, then you can start to do quite a bit. And the way that it's been working the last few years is that the energy density has been doubling year on year. So maybe that's possible in 3 years. That would be really cool. Nick Nocturnal asked, any news on the MAX comeback? Yeah, I believe that they are doing some really, really important flight testing now and towards the end of June. So I think that they're sticking with the schedule of having it out in August. But we shall see. And Daniel, it would be nice to come on your electric bus. Absolutely. Robert Mendes, what are some of your greatest or happiest moments in aviation? PS, you never got to be a passenger on a 727 or an ATR 42 or ATR 72. No, I haven't actually flown on the ATR, I think, and not on the 727 either. I'm trying to think. Maybe I've been on an ATR actually. I'm not sure now. I can't remember it anyway. Yeah, so greatest happiest moments. I mean, your first solo, my whole training actually, when I was doing my training in OSM Flight Academy back in Västerås, was one big happy memory. It was the work, like I've never had so much workload put on me in my life, but it was still like we were still a bunch of aviation crazy 17 and 18-year-olds that were out flying Cessnas. So I was out, sometimes you were out in the training area together with 2 or 3 of your best friends, each in one aircraft, doing steep turns or lazy eights, something like that. And those kind of things, like it's such a unique thing to think back on. You didn't realize, well, you did realize that it was cool already then. Like just the fact that you had to, I didn't even have my driver's license. I had to take my bike out and then fire up an aircraft and go out and fly with it alone without instructors. That was fantastic. So my whole training was great. First solo, of course, something that you'll always remember. Getting through the training, getting all of the licenses, getting that first job is another. Then, getting based the first time, my first annual leave when I felt that I actually got paid for being away from a flying job. So I could really thoroughly enjoy it. That was also another thing. Then I've talked about special flight, like the one that I just talked about, or when I got to deliver an aircraft, a brand new aircraft out of Seattle back to Dublin. That was also another crazy thing. And these things, they happen. Like you have these really great days. Maybe not every day, definitely not every day, but a few times here and there, you come home and you think like that was a really, really nice day now. And that's one of the many, many positive things of being in this occupation and doing this kind of job. Like it is satisfying, very satisfying. Brian Blazer, once again, Brian, your question did not come through for whatever reason. Can you please contact me through the Mentour Aviation app in the submit feedback, and I will answer your question there. Very sorry for that. Thank you for your support. Anyway, Anthony Ochoa, hi Mentor, happy to hear that you're almost back flying again. Love your channel. I'd like to see a live stream with Pilot Blog. Thanks. Oh yes, yeah. I know who that is. I'll see what I can do. Montemenasco, hi Petter. I've heard that the 737-200 was awesome compared to the 300. So when I flew on a 200, the takeoff roll was very long. Scary. Yeah, like everyone that I know who's flown the 200 says that it was like a sports car. It was built exactly the size that the 737 was meant to be. Obviously, those engines, which are very low bypass engines, they sound like a jet fighter. It basically is tearing a hole in the sky as it flies through, but it's not that powerful, Now, they could derate as well on 200. Fairly sure. I didn't fly the 200 myself, so I might be saying too much here. But there is a possibility that you might have felt like the takeoff roll was very long because you had a very long runway, and in that case, they could have derated the engines quite a bit. But yeah, it's hard for me. It's hard to say why you had that feeling. But I do know that as the aircraft was built, as in the flight controls, the size of the aircraft, the way it felt, was exactly like a 737 should be. The 800 and 900, the MAX, the ones that we're flying, they're stretched variants of it. They're a bit mushy in the controls, and they're quite hard to fly. The 200 was easier to fly and much more fun, apparently. So, at least that's what I've heard. Pagidar. Will turbofan engines keep getting larger and larger? Will we have a taller 737s or Airbus 320s to accommodate such engines? They would reach a point where they can't physically get much larger, just because, like you say, the aircraft they cannot stand on stilts, basically, unless they change it so that the engines end up on top of the wings instead. But that comes with other difficulties as well. So I think that they will try to make them as large as possible because it is more economic. to do it that way. But I don't, like we've seen already, the 737 is never going to be higher than it is right now. They had to use almost black magic to get the landing gear to extend an extra bit on the max in order to accommodate these engines, and even with that they had to move it forward and up, which is obviously one of the big problems that it had. So we're not going to see another version of the 737 with even larger landing gear. That you can be absolutely sure of. The max is the last iteration of the 737. The Airbus still have room, and the Airbus could probably extend it even further if they wanted to. But it's more likely that we will see newer types of aircraft rather than them making existing bigger engines fitted. At least that's my guess. Like, I'm not an expert when it comes to making aircraft. I just fly the things. Mantas Luxas, hello Mentor, love your channel. I was wondering if being a bad swimmer would hamper my chances of getting an airline job. It depends. You need to be able to swim, and in most airlines you do a swim test. But being slow swimmer, for example, doesn't matter. You just have to be able to survive. There might be some airlines out there who do have that you do have to swim below a certain time. I remember my wife, for example, when she took her flight attendant license here in Spain, there's a special license for that here. She had to swim below a certain time in order to be accepted into the school. So what I'm saying basically is that I don't think so. As long as you can swim and you can do so for a certain amount, then you should be fine. You need to be able to swim because there is a possibility that you might end up in water if you have to ditch the aircraft or whatever. Then you have to do it. But I don't think that you need to be I'm not an excellent swimmer. I can't swim though. James Burke. 2 questions and 1 suggestion. What is your thought on parachute main cabin in case of emergencies and to swap main cabins? My suggestion is to make a frequently asked question video. All right. Frequently asked questions, sure. We can see what we can do about that. I don't think that parachuting the main cabin in a case of emergency is a good idea. And in fact, I've made a video about it. You can actually look at that. You can search for Mentor and passenger parachute or something. I did one about passengers having a parachute. I also did one about the cabin having a parachute. Basically, that, like, the people who have suggested that fundamentally does not understand how we as pilots work, right? Because whenever we find a situation, like, it would be hard to come up with a situation where detaching the cabin would save the passengers or would be less dangerous than landing with a passenger. The only thing I can think about is like some kind of uncontrollable fire in the wings or in the cockpit or whatever, because if you have the fire inside of the cabin, then it doesn't help that you detach it. It's probably better to fly down and land and evacuate. But some kind of fire, or some kind, like if you lose, I don't know, you get a mid-air collision and you something like that. But the problem then is that in order for you to kind of detach the cabin, it means that you have to have the aircraft under control. You need to have the time to do it. It's not going to be just like a pull. It's probably going to be a sequence of things that you need to go through in order to detach the cabin. And if you have that kind of time, well, then it is probably just as good to go down and land the thing, right? It's that thing about the same as telling passengers, well, why don't we just give passengers parachutes? No, it doesn't work like that. You can't expect people to jump out of an aircraft at 37,000 feet without any training and survive. You can't even open the doors. Like, there's so much things. This is like populistic politics, right? It's almost exactly like that, because a populist will always come with an easy solution. Do this, do that. It's fine. Build a wall. Do that. And it will seem like, yeah, that will just solve everything. If you just do this one simple thing, it will solve all the problems. But then if you dig down deeper, you'll realize that actually it won't, because there are several other kind of things that you need to consider. So that one thing that looks very easy to do is not going to work, at least not in the way that you think it's going to be. And these kind of ideas, that's why they always get spread so much on the internet. Every time that someone come up with this idea, like the circular runway, or the aircraft that detaches the cabin, or passengers having parachutes, it always get like, you get the, everyone shares it, and I get tagged in a million posts saying that, oh, what do you think about this? Because it's so, for someone who doesn't understand or is not involved in the industry, it looks like such an obvious thing. Like, why haven't they already done this? Why isn't all aircraft detachable? Yeah. And then you go in and you ask some questions about it, and you do get the answer to that. That's why you should be checking out that video. Frequently asked questions, I have done a few of those, but I can definitely redo that. Have you ever had a rejected takeoff? Yes, I have, but at a very low speed. So I haven't had a high speed rejected takeoff yet. From Stuart Young Murray. Jero and Puyma. Due to COVID, KLM has to lay off some staff. KLM want one first in, first out on layoff. Government wants a few out of each 8 categories, like in other sectors. Okay. It's very complex on how to decide who is going to go. I understand both sides here. I am personally in favor of kind of a seniority system. It does feel fairly fair. However, it's going to disproportionately hit the younger pilots or cabin crew groups then, and that's the argument that the government is doing. Like, you can't just fire everyone below 20, which is what will happen effectively. So I understand both sides of it, and this is why you have to have discussions between the unions and the company when these things happen. Let's see. I'm running out a little bit out of voice here. I don't know if you can hear that, guys. So you missed my earlier question from Jake Schroeder. Okay, I'm gonna go back then and see, so I don't make sure I don't miss anything here. Sorry about that, Jake. Where is that? That must be really early then, Jake. There we go. Do you think the Airbus 380 would have been more successful if it only used 2 engines, or is it still too big? I mean, if they could put 2 engines on the 380, they would have. They can't. It's too big. They need 4 engines, at least with the current engines. It's possible that in the future they might find a way of putting 2 engines, but I don't think so. I think that they would be too large engines, basically. So no, I don't. Yes, I think that if they would have been able to, then the 380 would have been more successful than it is right now. But I don't think that it's possible. But it's an interesting question. Kokalti, for your airline interviews, did they ever check your math, reading, spelling skills, and how did they check that? Yeah, I had to go through 2 days of psychometric checking. It wasn't so much spelling, but it was definitely like math skills. It was cognitive thinking. It was like spatial recognition as well, spatial thinking. And this is all done by a set of computerized tests, and some written tests as well. I went through the KLM test battery, which is basically you sit inside of something they call a NAS test, NAS test. That was a small cockpit mock-up, and you sat in there for 4 hours straight, all right, with 3 computer screens, 2 joysticks, and you were getting problems on all of these 3 screens that you had to solve. And you just went from one test to the other. Sometimes you had to keep like a ball in the middle while you did a math test on the other screen, and you had to make sure the ball stayed in the middle. It was so bad, that test, that they actually had a person outside with a window looking in, and the only thing that person did was to make sure you didn't faint. Okay. Because it was badass. But yeah, they did that, and then your spelling and stuff they can check on your CV, the way that you write. It's not that much of a big deal if you can spell that well, I think. But the math stuff, the physics, all of these other things, really, really important. All right. And this is one of the big reasons why when we open up the Airline Pilot Club, which we will be opening up for members probably in the beginning of August, we have something that is fairly unique, which is the indicative assessment. right? It's an assessment that is available only for club members, and it will be there. It's unique in a couple of ways. It's using Aons. Aon is a company that creates tests for a lot of the bigger airlines and for flight schools out there. They have created this test for us, and it will be able to look into some of the most important categories of your personality to see whether you have it or not. And the other thing that makes it unique is that you'll get feedback on it. So instead of just saying, yeah, you passed, no, you didn't pass, here you're going to get, yeah, you need to improve on your math skills. Here's how you should do that. This is books that you should read. This is what you should focus on. So you'll be getting help to progress, to get better if you become a member. All right. So this is members only. And like I said, we are going to be coming out with more and more information about this, but we are aiming at the beginning of August to start taking in people for this. Greetings, Mentor, from Jon Pilot. Greetings, Mentor. I'm studying for my PPL written exams. Do you have any study suggestions for students, pilots like me? I'm reading the airplane flying handbook by the FAA right now. Yeah, I mean, your theoretical package should be enough in order for you to pass the test. I highly recommend you to do a little bit of practice tests as well, but don't rely on trying to learn the questions and answers. Do the practice tests. And when you come across a question that you're unsure of, even if you can guess the answer right, but if you're unsure of it, well, then you write down in your little side note there that you should be studying that, and you go out and you study that chapter. And you keep doing these practice exams and studying that way until you don't come across questions that you are unsure about anymore. That's when you know that you're ready. So you need to know the stuff. There's a lot of focus on question banks and stuff, and it's not healthy, because when you come to me and I ask you what kind of entry you should be doing into this NDB that you're coming into, I'm not expecting you to burp up an answer to an ATPL question. I'm not expecting you to understand why you need to do that entry, why you need to do one thing instead of another when you have two contradicting things. The only thing that will bring you there is your knowledge. All right, it's you knowing the subject, knowing it well enough to know when you can step away from something, for example. So knowledge is what you need, but you also need to be able to pass the tests. So you need to balance those two things, right? I don't think it's that much of a problem for a PPL student, but it will definitely be when you come to your ATPLs. But do remember that. And then, yeah, read everything you get. If you can find a manual out there that will help you, that is written in a way that makes you understand it better, sure. As long as you can get the knowledge, I don't think anyone cares how you got that knowledge. Super Cheap Man, thank you very much. Same for Sinclair Rodriguez. Thank you for supporting the channel. Tano 101, how often do you fly with the same crew? Quite often, right? It happens now and then. If you're in a small base and you are on the same roster as someone, it's likely that you're going to fly quite often. If you're on a bigger base where there might be hundreds of crew, then there might be 6 months in between each time that you fly with the same person. So I fly very rarely with the same person for the simple reason that I tend to be training. So I get cadets. So then I fly with that cadet for a while, and then he or she disappears to their base, and then I get a new cadet. But no, normally if you're in a small base, you can fly with the same person quite often. Marius M. Hi, Mentor. I'm a nervous flyer, but fly quite regularly. Does this mean that I'm just a coward? Thanks. No, absolutely not. No. The fact that you're a nervous flyer is completely normal. In fact, a third of humanity, 30% of everyone that flies, are nervous flyers to a certain extent. Right? It might be a little bit, as in you don't like it, up to you're terrified. Right? So there's a huge kind of gap there, but you are absolutely not a coward. This is just a matter of finding out what helps you. All right. If you're watching my videos to get explanations about noises and what we do, and that helps you, great. If it doesn't help you, and if knowledge about what's going on doesn't help you, well, then you need to look into some other means. It might be actually going to a psychologist and tell them that you have this problem, and they can dive into it and see if there's something else in the background that you need to solve. All right. If it's manageable, well, then maybe you just try to relax, do some relaxation exercises, some meditation or whatever. I'm going to do a course for this. I know I've said that for years now, but I'm actually planning it now, and I had a plan in force for when this pandemic hit. But what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to give a a guide together with a friend of mine who's a coach, who can do these relaxation exercises and stuff. We're going to talk about how you know deal with the week before you fly, when you get to the airport, when you stand in the check-in desk as you're walking down to the aircraft. I'm going to be focusing a lot on explaining what me and my colleagues are doing. You know, you're sitting here looking at 45 minutes left to departure. I can tell you what the pilots are doing now, and I can give you, you know, the pilot's perspective. So when you're sitting out in the aircraft and you hear a noise, then you should be able to go in and you should be able to, you know, understand what that noise comes from, why it happens at that point, or why you don't hear it sometimes, things like that. So that's what I'm planning to do, and that's definitely going to be available to mentorpilot.com and inside of the app, obviously. Cool. Sinclair Rodriguez, okay, your message disappeared. Victor, hi Petter. What will happen if suddenly you see 3 teams of sumo wrestlers boarding, or let's say 60% of packs are overweight? How can you calculate that? Yeah, so I can always ask to verify the weights. All right, there is a possibility. As a commander, you always have to make sure that the weight is correct. And since we're using standard weight, there is always a possibility, if you see that the standard weights are grossly off, to ask the dispatcher to verify the weights. And you could weigh them. That is a possibility. Now, that wouldn't happen. All right, I've never even heard of that happening, especially not in bigger aircraft. But you could do it. Like, the possibility to verify the weights are there. And you could also estimate it. Like, you could see that, okay, so I have 60% grossly overweight passengers. Let's call our operations control, tell them what problem we have, see if we can adjust it up with maybe 40% or something like that. Like, there are ways around this. Like, I would be very hesitant to ask people to go off and get on to scales. I would prefer to look at it and see, like, okay, so, you know, half of this aircraft weighs over 100 kilos. Let's go with 110 kilos on half of it, and then work the maths from there. Be on the safe side, basically. But if I saw a problem like that, I would definitely talk to the dispatcher, talk to our operations control, and see how we can solve it in a good way. All right, in a kind of discreet and nice way. But it's a great question. The thing is, like, that would be if you saw the whole aircraft filling up with like a sumo convention, right? Otherwise, it tends to balance out. You have some really petite girls coming in together with some fairly large gentlemen, or the other way around. It tends to end up balancing each other out. Monte Menasco, part 2. It was 11,500 runway for the 737-200. When Southwest started getting the 300s, seemed like they had a short takeoff rule. Yeah, I mean, the 300s, they had more engine power. There's no way around that. Like, they had the CFM 56 engines on those ones already. So it is possible that, you know, the answer to the question is that they were more powerful. But if you have a long runway like that, then you can actually fly a slightly less powered aircraft out of it with the same weight anyway. But without me knowing exactly the facts and stuff, it's very hard for me to say. Do you prefer jet bridges or remote stands? Depends. All right, I prefer remote stands where the passengers can get off on steps forward and back and get straight into the terminal. I don't prefer remote stands which have buses, because that's going to take a lot longer to board. The jetways are nice, but it tends to also slow down the boarding, because when they have jetways, you tend to not be able to board through the back. You can only use the forward entrance, and that will take a lot longer to get all the passengers off and all of the passengers on again. So yeah, it's a bit of a Depends. Answer. Right, guys. You don't need to do any more super chat questions now, guys, because I'm running out of voice here. Tobias Johnson, can I take a PPL license when I have ADD? Yeah, you can, as long as you're not taking medication. Okay, if you're going on any kind of psychopharmaca, then you need to join. Well, in any case, you need to talk to your AME, to your aeromedical examiner, right, your doctor, and they will decide. But in most cases, it's more about what you can actually do yourself. Like, can you control it? Can you concentrate enough to get through your exams, to listen to your instructor, to take decisions, all of that, and obviously without psychopharmaca, because psychopharmaca, I think you need to be off that for at least 6 months before you can even go for your medical tests. But once again, this is kind of borderline medical questions, and what you should be doing is talk to a aeromedical center or an aeromedical examiner there. Jeroen Poiman, if you change airline, would you stay as a captain? In some cases, I can go as a direct entry captain. In most cases, I will have to go in as a first officer. Like that. Balai, Sharat Kumar, have you found any ATC misunderstood your voice? Yeah, sometimes you do. But they just say again, and you repeat, and that's it. This is why you need to keep the anytime that you talk to air traffic control, and any communication you do with air traffic control has to be following very, very specific wording. Like there is a specific way to say every single message, and it has to be followed that way, so that people from different cultures, from different countries, with different accents can still communicate effectively. But of course, from time to time, you misunderstand each other, especially if you go outside of that. If you have a special request for whatever reason, so you have to use plain English, then it can become a problem. Pascal Spagnuolo, thank you for your support. And Martin P. W. Epwich, do cabin crew have any cockpit training in case both pilots turn out to be incapacitated? No. Generally, no. They don't. We'd show them during our safety and security training how to, for example, move the pilots out of their seats. They have to be able to do that in case of incapacitation. And also we tend to show them, like, this is the radio, this is how you operate it, these are the headset, this is how you put them on, and stuff. But it's extra. There's no official training for cabin crew to fly the aircraft. They couldn't be. It's as easy as that. So that's it. Montemanasco have the last one on the super chat. Thank you very much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here together with you guys to answer your questions. You can take a few one here from the normal chat as well. Spider-Man, nobody knows who you are. That's an odd one. Christopher Johnson, you didn't see Petter spin around. Thank you. Now everybody, let's play Simon Says. Steve Perry, how about a video about the most fuel efficient approach and landing, engine to idle from cruise altitude? Yeah, I mean, that's how we tend to fly all of our approaches, really. Like we always aim to have them idle down to when you have to spool it up for the final approach. So could be done, absolutely. Peter is very, very smart, but I fooled him. All right. But to turn around. Simon Says. All right. Why do pilots move the flight controls a lot when they're on final? Sometimes it looks excessive. Is it the winds? Yeah, it looks excessive. Sometimes maybe it's a little bit over. First of all, there's a bit of a slack. All right. It's not. There's no direct. Like, it's not like your computer controls where you just move it a little bit and you get immediate response. There's a little bit of slack in it, and sometimes you move it just a little bit in order to kind of feel the aircraft, to see how much you need to input in order to counteract a gust, for example. But when you are flying in a lot of winds and there's a lot of turbulence, you are constantly moving it. But what you'll notice is that the aircraft attitude and what you're feeling in the back is nothing. It just feels smooth. And that's because we feel when we get a gust of wind, and when you feel that that's coming, you counteract it even before the aircraft has actually reacted to it. So you get the correction in even before it happens, and by doing that, you actually keep it steady all the time, and it looks like you're constantly flying it, and you are, but you'll definitely notice when you start flying yourself. You feel it in your ass how the aircraft is moving. You counteract it, make sure that it's as smooth as possible. So while you're sitting there doing this, what the passenger are feeling is this. Okay, so it's not excessive. There might be the odd one who's doing too much, and then you can get into something called pilot-induced oscillations, PO, and that's when you kind of overreact and you go too much from one side to the other, and the aircraft start doing this because of you. That's a training thing. But in most cases, if you don't fly, if you don't feel anything and you don't see anything happening while they're working like that, well, then they're doing just enough. Good. That's it. How old are you? Is the last question. I'm 38, turning 39. That means that I am 18 years in the business, turning 19 years in the business, because I started when I was 20. Cool. That's it, guys. Thank you very much. Now head over to the Mentour Aviation app, check out the chat, check out the technical forums. If you have questions about any aircraft, 737, if you want to put a new forum in, you can do that. You can check out the news, what's going on. There's always like 50 different news about the aviation industry inside of the app every single day. So you should definitely go and check it out. There's links to the app down here, or you just go to mentorpilot.com/apps and you can download it for free and enter in there. So I'll see you inside of the Mentour Aviation app. I always go in there to kind of wind down after my live streams. Have an absolutely fantastic day. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.